Hello and welcome to this podcast. I have here with me Ulf Sandström. He is a coach, mentor, and therapist. Hello, Ulf. Would you like to introduce yourself to us very briefly, and then I'll ask you the 6 questions?
Wow, that's exciting. Yeah, well, I'm also a father of two, and I'm a musician since I was 15. And yeah, I'm a like I said, coach, mentor, and therapist, which means I'm helping people with sports psychology. So I'm training teams and corporations and families to become better teams, and that's positive psychology. I'm also a hypnotherapist, so I use hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming in what I do and combine it. I'm also a co-creator of a technique called trauma tapping technique, and I use havening, of course. So, yep, helping people in different ways to put a smile on their face.
That's wonderful. So this leads really nicely into my first question, and that's how did you come to use healing methods in your work? So if you want to tell the story about how you got there, what you did before, and then
Oh my God. Okay. So, I'll try to keep it short, but as you'll notice, I don't. Uh, so I don't know how much time we have, but I'll give you a short version. So I grew up in a lot of different countries. So my dad was in the Foreign Service. So I lived in Colombia. I lived in Tunisia. I lived in Cuba, in Argentina, in the U.S., in Hungary under the Soviet regime, in Spain under military dictature of Franco. So I've seen a lot of different social and cultural values and systems and oppression and poverty and vast riches. And this will make a young boy think. It made me think, what is it actually that gives people values and norms, and how do you feel good about stuff? And you kind of become a little bit philosophical when you have to move around between these places as a young person and reinvent yourself in every new culture. So there came in an interest in psychology, or what makes us tick and talk. And then from there, when I was around 15, I started working as a professional musician, did a couple of thousand gigs. Maybe I've done 4,000 or 5,000 concerts up to today. And at some point on that road, I got interested because it was actually after a burlesque show in a bar where we were celebrating the new child of the knife throwing magician. And he said, "You should meet my friend Frederick. He does hypnosis." And I'm like, "Why would I want that?" And he said, "Well, it's very useful. You can get rid of phobias and you can do stage entertainment." And I like stage entertainment, but my wife actually has a shark phobia. You remember the movie Jaws? Doom, 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 doom. Terrible. Gave everybody phobias. And then if you put the man with the golden gun after that, where the shark comes into the swimming pool with James Bond. Terrible. So I call my wife and I say, "I have this person here. I'm in a bar, darling, and he says he can get rid of your phobia." And she says, "How many times? How many sessions?" And I look at him and I say, "How many sessions?" And he says, 20 minutes. And I'm like, "What?" So we tried it and it worked, and that perked my interest. So I started using hypnosis in my stage show as a musician to make the audience more engaged in the show. And I used to bet with the guys in the band if I could, arrange a standing ovation or not, which is not that hard. There's mechanics to it. And of course, you have to
You
play
mean you
something
can
entertaining.
orchestrate your own standing ovation?
Yeah, yeah.
That's cool.
Providing providing the show is good, of course, but it's very easy to install in people that feeling of wanting to stand up. And if you get the people in front of the stage to stand up who paid the most for their tickets, which they will want to stand up because they want to like it. And if you get them to stand up, the ones behind them can't see anything, so they'll stand up too. In short. Okay. So after that, I said, this is interesting, but I need some more tools. So I looked at NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, because Frederick Presto, who taught hypnosis, also taught that. And then I started thinking that's useful for writing lyrics and writing text and poetry. And I started to understand the ticky-talk of human perception of who we are in constructive experience, our subjective experience. And in that training, a part of it was that you should do therapy to some people. You should help people get rid of a phobia or stop smoking or biting their nails. And I kind of got hooked because this was interesting. You're making people change. And that's interesting because coming from all those experiences and cultures and different challenges people had, it was always an interest. How do you make people feel okay regardless of the situation outside? And I started also realizing people came up to us after a concert and said, I haven't been out my house in 2 years. I came here because I heard you a couple of years ago and I wanted to relive that experience. I'm like, this is therapy. It's not music. Where I'm actually doing therapy on stage. And then I realized music is therapy for the hundreds or thousands, and therapy is a concert for one. And I, with that mindset, I started exploring it because it was interesting. And if anybody tries to make a living as a musician, you realize you're not going to be playing 24/7. So it's good to have something else. And I enjoyed it. And then I found that I couldn't resolve everything with people with just talk, or it was a challenge when language was a barrier, which it is in some cases. I grew up in many places. I talk a few languages, but not, it's like 4 maybe. But you still run into places where language or culture is a barrier. So I started Googling and found this Swedish woman who happened to be in Rwanda helping people after the genocide get rid of their traumas without talking to them. And that's my now colleague, Gunilla Hamne. And she had started using a variant of thought field therapy, which is a tapping technique. And after we met and we started, seeing all the similarities and wanting to work together, we founded an organization called the Peaceful Heart Network, a humanitarian NGO that spread tapping to alleviate suffering and prevent violence, because the tapping worked without words. And I could see the usefulness together with hypnosis, NLP, and standalone. And so from that, quick zoom over to hypnosis, Doug O'Brien. Doug O'Brien comes to Sweden, hypnotist, and starts talking about havening. He says, you guys, you're doing this tapping, you should check out havening. Have you heard about the book, When the Past is Always Present? And we said, yeah, we love that book. It's the first one that actually puts a scientific hypothesis around what's working with tapping. Yeah, Dr. Ronald Rudin, you should talk to him. He's great. So we didn't realize, that he was just an email away. And Doug introduced us, and Ron was beautiful in inviting us to London to learn havening. So after that, that's my quad case of tools, like the hypnosis, the NLP, the tapping, and the havening.
Were you there on that first havening training in 2013?
No, I wasn't. It was a tad later.
Okay, all right. I was going to
I
say,
was in London with Paul McKenna.
all right, because I don't remember seeing you on that first one. It was a small group, but yeah, it was the beginning
I
of.
think it was the third one, 15, I think it was.
Oh, was it? Right. Great. So yeah, that's what happens, isn't it? We get hooked on one thing and then we realize there's something missing. And are you at the stage now where you feel you have the whole toolkit with havening was the missing piece, or?
Well, I'm kind of a curious person, so I don't think there ever is a whole toolkit. I do tell people, if they ask me, I'd like to do what you're doing, they ask me, what is it you do? And I say, well, you can't say I do one thing because it's a mixture of eclectic techniques, but I do need the neurolinguistic programming or something similar to it to be able to deconstruct what people actually are doing in their mind and to know how to change part of that. I do need the hypnosis or a trance state to get people focused enough to create a big change in a short time. And I do need psychosensory techniques like havening tapping. For me, they're like, like the Cubans say, el mismo perro otro collar. It's the same dog with a different leash. So I do need that because I have to be able to work bottoms up. So hypnosis and NLP is top down, and the psychosensory is bottoms up. And with those together, I can do what I do today. And maybe there will be another, wonderful technique that pops up on the radar, and I'll explore it and add it. But so far, during the last
What about
12
heart
years,
math? Have you heard of heart math?
yeah, heart math. I mean, heart math is fine. Matrix reimprinting is fine, and I work with sport teams, and we work with. I mean, we're doing studies together with Peter Stapleton at Bond University on these techniques, and I buy gadgets because I'm an engineer, so I used to be developing electronic equipment. So I kind of like stuff that blinks and goes beep, and so I bought QEEG, helmets to measure brain waves, and
Oh,
looked
great.
into all that and heart rate
Oh,
variability,
and is it
and at the end of the day, it's enough with the stuff I have so far.
right? Yes, enough to be getting on with and getting some actual data with that. Otherwise, you just keep going and going. Um, so yeah, very cool. So what are you working on right now then? What's your main focus right now?
Oh dear me. Well, that was a question. Well, we've just finished. I have two books. One with Gunilla, the trauma tapping technique, which is this book, and
Oh,
and
yes.
we just finished translating that to French, and we're translating it to German, and Spanish is in the pipeline. So there we describe tapping, havening, and 12 other techniques, and how to work with groups and how to work with traumatized populations, humanitarian outreach. It's a village worker handbook. But then I'm working together with Frederick Presto, and we're writing about hypnosis, and we've developed a psychological behavior explanation system, which is called the Behavior Compass, which works wonderfully to coach people with very little prior knowledge from one state to another, or to understand people. So we've been teaching that to social workers and other people, and we're working with addiction recovery programs. The other book, I'll just lean over and get it, not because it's
Oh,
very live and it's happening here and now.
yes, is it live? You saw it here
Something exciting.
first.
Look, it
And
wasn't
all these
faked.
books
And
in the background.
so this is Unpack Your Existence. That's the book that I've written with Frederick. And we sat down during 5 years every morning and discussed what is it that actually makes a change for our
And this
clients.
is the
So
guy that first introduced you to hypnosis, yeah?
yeah, the guy in the bar. So
Oh,
the shark phobia for my wife. So
so cool.
we kind of put on the engineering hats and looked at a couple of thousand clients. What is it that makes a difference for most of them? What is the common denominator? If we can boil this down to this little toolkit that anybody can explore without actually learning therapy or learning hypnosis or learning NLP, but just experiencing it. And so that's what that book is. That book is 34 hypnotic explorations, where you get a chance to explore what it is to be what we say the best humans around today, which means interacting with sustainability and empowerment, and not being entitled, and collaborating, and being just and moral. Kind of the same stuff that the Stoics were looking at
And
2,000
this
years ago.
kind
But
of comes from your background of seeing all those different cultures and you're kind of putting a vision together that would be the heart-centered service to others type mentality. Is that right?
yeah, definitely. Spot on. That's exactly it. Having seen that and been around that, I mean, if you've experienced both military dictature and communism and extreme capitalism and all that, you realize that we're all people, we're all mammals. Everybody's stressed in all of these systems. There's no difference. And there's good and evil intentions, and there's good and evil actions, and sometimes they're the opposite of each other. So any little thing we can do that contributes to a better world, I think if all of us just pitch in a little bit into that, I think we can have a better world overnight.
Absolutely. And making people aware that they can change and that they can choose. Because, as we know, sort of therapists, helpers, people are in a sort of a hypnosis of, let's say, misery, for want of a better word, and they don't realize that they can be better, feel better, have more. Like my story, it was a real eye opener for me when I read Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And,
Yeah.
her thing was, there are no mistakes. And I was terrified of making mistakes. And here this lady saying, there are no mistakes. You make the best of the decisions that you make. And that just opened up a whole world. So these books that, let's say, you're writing are going to help people become aware that, there is a different way to do it, to do life.
And that's exactly what we hope. I mean, we basically sat down. I'm a fan of the Stoics and the ancient philosophers and letters from Seneca and Epictetus and Aristotle. They wrote stuff, and the fascinating part for me is what they wrote is equally valid today. 2,000 years later, we
Right.
can still learn from them as if they were next to us and apply that in our everyday life because it's about the stuff that will always be around: morals, just values, how should we behave towards each other. So we actually, without being pretentious, we wrote that book, Unpack Your Existence, so that it could be read 2,000 years from now, by not referring to stuff that's cultural today, by not referring to technology. So it's written in the kind of same vibe
That's
with that
fantastic.
intention. And what you're saying, there are no mistakes. I mean, that in NLP, there's this one of these basic phrases, which is there are no mistakes, only feedback, which kind of can be very provocative for a lot of people because, of course, there are mistakes. But the gist of it is, if you don't see a mistake as a mistake, you see it as a learning experience, then it has a value regardless of the outcome when it happened. And I think that's a very valuable asset to have. So don't fear mistakes, rather, fail fast and find out and learn and get back on your feet and do something else. So yeah,
Yeah, fail fast. Yeah, I've heard that. That's a good one. Absolutely.
imagine that in relationships. How much money would people save, and time, and houses?
Well, my motto there is love yourself. Learn to love yourself first, and then you'll attract the what's the word? The complementary partner to who you are at that moment.
Yeah.
What's your
And
thoughts?
I want to add to that. Sometimes, because there's this saying that I kind of like in Kinyarwanda, which is the language in Rwanda, it's called Ichirezi, and it means your precious pearl within, or the precious diamond inside you. And the idea is that sometimes you cannot see your value through your own eyes. It has to be seen through the eyes of somebody else or through the compassion of somebody else. So sometimes another person could actually help you to find what there is to love about you by showing it to you.
Absolutely. And that's what relationships are for, isn't it? They're a mirror of our best self or potential. So, but that's a whole nother podcast, relationships, for which I think you have some good knowledge on. I don't know why. I just feel you have some very good knowledge on that. So, my next question is, what intrigued you about havening techniques? I know we talked about, the history and that, but that there's something about havening techniques that is different and, makes it a little bit special. So, is there something that you feel jumps out at you around havening techniques?
Yeah, not the actual technique, but the science it's built upon, the approach that it takes. I tell people, I mean, like I said, coach and mentor. If I do mentoring to somebody, whether they're wanting to be a therapist or a coach or just a better communicator, I tell them whatever skills you already have. If you don't have any psychosensory skill, I would go for havening first, because you have a science and you have a structure that whatever you're doing, you will become better at, because you're understanding decoding and encoding and decoding of trauma, conditioning. You're understanding how the mind works and how signals come into our perception under our awareness with neuroception, which is how we can be triggered by something subliminally. And when we can resolve it. So I would tell anybody who's trained in tapping or EFT or TAT or TRE or any of these three-letter techniques or modalities, do the havening training anyhow, because the actual structure where you're doing event, where you're looking at a memory, or you're doing transpirational, where you're looking at an emotion. So you're basically coaching emotions or memories, if you use other names for it, and you're coaching beliefs if you look at informational havening. So it's a neat toolbox, looking and comparing, what's actually happening chemically, neurologically, hormonally in the brain and system, how does that relate to what you're doing when you're calming down the system with a touch? So for me, that's what jumps out. And what jumped out also is, since it has a scientific part to it, and yet it's a kind of woo-woo with, you're touching stuff, and psychology is shifting. So for some people that is woo-woo, and for me it's just the science of touch. But at the conference, I noticed there were many people who were trained in hypnosis. There were many people who were trained in NLP or something to the like of it, which means it has a curious community that is prepared to look at both science and touch. So
Because
that's a cool thing, what it attracts. Because other techniques, they go straight to a kind of a rabbit hole of what is supposed to be the mechanism that works here, and it is, and maybe it is more. So maybe there are more ways of explaining stuff.
yeah, it is intriguing that hypnosis, NLP are essentially non-touch, apart from if you anchor,
Yeah, apart
but
from anchoring and apart from kinesthetic hypnosis, which is cool, where you put people in trance by how you touch them.
oh yes, the hand technique, and then you've got massage, which I've had massage sessions where I've actually had an emotional release, and I didn't know why. It was like there was
Yep.
acupuncture, and but with, like you say, with havening, we kind of understand what's going on there now, chemically, neurologically.
I would say, I'm not sure if the explanation for havening is the only one, or if it's all. I think we're going to get much more information the more we have studies on it, the more we have fMRI scans looking at it, the more we learn about the hormonal system, because it's complex and
Yeah.
it's not black and white. And I mean, now we're having research showing that the amygdala is, for example, not involved in the same way in processing of OCD and addiction that it is in the processing of fight and flight fear. So, but yet havening works for both. So it can't be only that. There's more to it, but it has a starting point, and that's what's important. It gives us some place to say, maybe this is what's going on. And it's kind of like quantum mechanics or physics. It's not vital that the scientific hypothesis or explanation is spot on, super right. It's vital that it gives us a way to apply the technique that works. And the havening structure really, really works. I love it.
Yeah, we love it. Absolutely. So my next question is, what are you most passionate about, in terms of your trajectory, in terms of your work and what you have to offer the world? What's driving you? What's your tick and tock?
Well, what makes me TikTok is to, if I can contribute to a positive change with anything that I'm skilled at. I mean, I have clients of all walks of life. I work with criminals who are looking to get out of criminality. I work with crime, both offenders and survivors of criminal acts. I mean, everybody needs help in different ways and comes from different mindsets. And I think it's fascinating to find what makes a difference. Now, if you look at the Quran, I have long discussions with with a client who's a devout Muslim, and we discuss this a lot because there's lots of good philosophy in that faith. So I ask him, what is it that is most important? Well, he says that the Quran says that you should contribute to society, and you should find something that you are good at. It doesn't matter if you're sweeping the street, or you're a psychologist, or a rocket scientist, or if you make falafel or whatever. Just be the best you can at what you do and offer it to whoever wants it, and contribute some of that to society. And I think, yeah, that makes me TikTok. So if it's hypnosis, or if it's entertainment, if it's magic, if it's stage performance, or if it's photography, whatever it is that I have been looking at through life and found that I could make some kind of difference with, I'm happy to offer that difference and try to do it as good as possible. And that makes me TikTok.
Right. Beautiful. Nice and simple, but complex at the same time to actually be aware of that. That's wonderful. So my fifth question is, what would you like to tell people about your work?
I'm not sure I know. It depends on what there you go. If you want to create a difference, it's not about me and what I want to tell. It's about what they would benefit from knowing. So I would ask them, is there anything in your life that you would like to have happen in a different way? Anything at all? And maybe I could contribute to that. Maybe I can't. And that's what I would like to tell them. Hopefully whatever would contribute. It wouldn't serve me to tell them something specific. Except
Yeah.
maybe, I would tell them, do you know that most of what's in the DSM-5,
That's
most of what's in this book, a wonderful book, a great attempt to try to find out how people tick and talk, and maybe shooting over the goal a little bit, because if you look at every single diagnosis in there, some of them are put as this is it. If you have over 5 points on this symptom scale, you have this or you don't have it. And that's not my experience. It states that some things are chronic or pathological. You can't get rid of them, like post-traumatic stress disorder is usually presented like that. And that's completely wrong. You can get rid of it. So I would say that healing, actually, if you want to call it healing or recovering or reset, is possible for loads of stuff in there. And loads of stuff that we call disorders are, I have another acronym for PTSD. It's not post-traumatic stress disorder. It's perpetuating traumatic stress defense system there to protect you. And it can be reset if it's overprotecting you.
Yeah.
So don't believe everything you read and hear. And science is always evolving, and it's been wrong and right. And loads of stuff that seem to be enormous challenges to people can actually be resolved, and it doesn't always have to take a lot of time, and sometimes it does.
Great. So you're offering hope to the hopeless. The people have tried everything. Fantastic. So my mystery question is,
mysteries.
What would you tell our listeners about how to be more resilient? What is resilience, and how can they be more resilient?
Yeah, well, that's the question, isn't it? How can we be more resilient? Because if you have a skill and you're stressed, your stress will cloud your skill. Your skill is irrelevant. That's David and Goliath. So if you want to be of service, if you care about that, either for yourself or for the world or for somebody else, you need to be your best self. And to be your best self, you need to not be reactive, not be overstressed. So naturally, your resilience, and here I recommend Robert Sapolsky, lecturer at Stanford, fantastic guy. He has a fan site for him, Robert Sapolsky Rocks. He's a professor. He's written loads of books, and he says how you actually react in any given moment, it has to do with how you slept tonight. It has to do with what you just ate, or if you're hungry, or if you need to go to the bathroom. It has to do with if you've been stressed the last weeks or months or years. It has to do with your genetics and the environment you're in. It has to do with how your mother was reacting to life when you were in her womb, your prenatal conditioning. If you were born with an enlarged amygdala and pre-shrunken hippocampus because she was stressed. It has to do with generations before that of people. If you were walking in the jungle and watching out for certain predators all the time, or if you were basking in a sunny field just eating grapes growing out of the ground or from trees. So I would say it depends, all of this depends, but sleep, social interaction, good sustainable meals, avoiding all the whites, the sugars and the flours and whatever else is bad for you. Keep low on alcohol and measurable on coffee and moving around and exercising. And once all that is in place, because it's the sum of everything, what can you do besides that? Well, you can do daily havening or tapping or something similar. You can do daily yoga exercise or breathing. Those are also techniques that increase your resilience. Anything that calms your nervous system, empties your bucket of stress, creates more resilience. And when life gives you traumatic reactions because it wants you to avoid certain unpleasant situations in the past, you do havening and tapping for them every time they are triggered.
Mm.
So when you're triggered, you do tapping, havening. When you are, if you want to increase your resilience before you go to sleep, well, you go to sleep in a good time, preferably an hour or two before midnight. And you do havening or tapping or breathing before you fall asleep so that you empty your system from physically from whatever stress is in there so that you get a good night's sleep. And when you wake up in the morning, you do the same thing so that you meet the day with a higher resilience. With all those other things in place and that, I think you're going to have a spiffy life. And sometimes it's going to be, pretty dark, and you're going to be walking in the valley of the dark and the void of darkness, because life serves darkness sometimes, and you can't really control that. And there's stress from the outside. But like the Stoics said, if you maintain a calm center, your chances of balancing that are so much higher. And then there's the big one, ask for help. And when people offer you help, there's an even bigger one, especially if you're a guy. Accept the help.
Wow. Yes. And on that note, I would like to offer people where they can find you. So if you'd like to let us know where people can find you, how to contact you so that you can offer your help and they can accept,
I'm
where would that
here.
be?
I'm here. Yeah. Well, okay. So, well, I have a website. My own website is ulfsandstrom.com, and you'll find it if you Google my name and Ulf and Havening or Ulf and Hypnosis or whatever. ulfsandstrom.com. I also would recommend you to go to the peacefulheart.se website, because there we have loads of free tools and stuff that you can get about havening and tapping that you can use in our book as a PDF. And I would also love to be your, if you would like to follow me on Instagram, and I'll be happy to follow you back. I'm also on YouTube, same thing, Ulf Sandström. There's a channel there with loads of stuff. I like giving stuff away. I was told it's a bad business idea, but it turns out the opposite. It's a good business idea. You give stuff away, and if it's good stuff, then people will want to talk to you anyhow, and some will want to have a personal session maybe, or help with a team or family or corporation or whatever it may be.
Yeah,
So
I definitely
I'm all
agree.
over. Yeah.
I
So
shall
just
put those links in the description below the YouTube channel or wherever I post this. And I want to thank you very, very much for all you do for humanity. And thank you very much for agreeing to do this podcast. So
well,
thank you
thank
very
you.
much.
And I'd like to thank you for doing this podcast, because it, it gives me a chance to reach the people that you talk to, which I wouldn't do otherwise. And also, I think the thing with humanity, I'd just like to touch on that, because I realized this very early when you're in a different political systems, and some people have more than others, and some are suffering. And realizing that humanity is you and me. I am humanity, so are you. And if we're all in the same swimming pool, even if we're in different ends of it, it doesn't matter who pees, it's going to be in the water. So we need to behave, and we need to, be sustainable and kind of take care of each other, even the ones we don't like, because they're all part of the same humanity. And that's how we make this work. Let's just be the best humans possible right now, because that's what we got.
Fantastic. And on that note, I will thank you very much. Thank you, Ulf.
Thank you. Thanks.